Book of Heaven, Volume 4. 9th to the 18th of March 1903. Page 179 to 182. March 9, 1903. Jesus speaks about humility and about correspondence to grace. Continuing in my usual state, I could hear blessed Jesus praying in my interior, saying, "Holy Father, glorify your name. Confuse the proud and hide yourself from them, and manifest yourself to the humble, because only one who is humble recognizes you as his creator, and recognizes himself as your creature." Having said this, he no longer let himself be heard, though I comprehended the power of humility before God. It seemed to me that God has no restraint in entrusting the most precious treasures to the humble. On the contrary, everything is open for them, nothing is under lock and key. All the opposite for the proud. Even more, it seems that he puts a cord around their feet to confuse them at each step. Then, a little later, he made himself seen again, and told me, "My daughter, one can know whether a body is alive from its continuous internal heat. It can also be warmed through some external heat, but since this heat does not come from true life, the body quickly cools down again. The same with the soul. It can be known whether she is alive to grace, whether her internal life is alive and operating, in loving me, if she feels the strength of my very life within hers. If then it is because of some external cause that she warms up, does some good and then cools down again, returning to vices and committing the usual weaknesses, there is great certainty that she is dead to grace, or is at the last extremes of life. In this way one can know whether it is truly I who go to the soul, if she feels my grace in her interior, and all of her good is founded within her interior. If then it is all external and she perceives nothing good in her interior, it can be the work of the devil." While saying this, he disappeared, but after a little while he came back and added, "My daughter, how terrible it can be for those souls who have been much fecundated by my grace, but have not corresponded to it." The Jewish nation was the favorite one, the most fecundated, and yet, the most sterile. And the whole of my person could not obtain that fruit which Paul obtained in other nations, less fecundated, but more corresponding. In fact, lack of correspondence to grace blinds the soul, it makes her deceive herself, and disposes her to obstinacy, even in the face of any miracle. March 12, 1903. The sacrifice of Jesus continues in his Eucharist life, in which he exercises continuous pressure on the Father for the sake of mankind. A soul who is victim with him must also put this continuous pressure on him. As I was in my usual state, I saw myself as all alone and abandoned. Then, after I struggled very much, he made himself seen in my interior, and I said to him, "My sweet life, how is it that you have left me alone? When you put me in this state everything was union, we arranged everything together, and with sweet force you drew me completely to yourself. Oh, how the scene has changed! Not only have you abandoned me, not only do you not put any pressure on me to keep me in this state, but I myself am forced to put continuous pressure on you so as not to go out of this position, and this pressing you is a continuous dying for me." He told me, "My daughter, the same happened when in the consistory of the Sacrosanct Trinity the mystery of the Incarnation was decreed in order to save mankind, and I, united with their will, accepted and offered myself as victim for man. Everything was union among them, and we arranged everything together, but when I set to work, a point came, especially when I found myself in the sphere of pains, of opprobrium, loaded down with all the wicked deeds of creatures, in which I remained alone and abandoned by all, even by my dear Father. Not only this, but loaded down as I was with all pains, I had to press the Omnipotent One to accept and to let me continue my sacrifice for the salvation of the whole of mankind, present and future. And I obtained this, and the sacrifice is still lasting, the pressure is continuous, though it is all a pressure of love. Do you want to know where and how? In the sacrament of the Eucharist. In it the sacrifice is continuous. Perpetual is the pressure I put on the Father to use mercy upon creatures, and on souls, in order to obtain their love, and I find myself in a continuous contrast, dying continuously, though all deaths of love. So, aren't you happy that I let you participate in the periods of my very life?" March 18, 1903. One who does the will of God chooses the optimum. This morning, as the confessor asked me whether I felt the desire to suffer, I answered him, yes. But I felt more tranquil and enjoyed more peace and contentment when I wanted nothing but what God wants. Therefore I wanted to stop in it. Then, afterwards, when blessed Jesus came, he told me, "My daughter, you have chosen the optimum, because one who is always in my will binds me in such a way as to make a continuous virtue come out of me which keeps her in continuous attitude toward me. So much so, that she forms my food, and I hers." On the other hand, even if the soul did great, holy and good things, since it is not virtue that came out of me, it cannot be an enjoyable food for me, because I do not recognize it as a work of my will.